So I recently reviewed a Range Rover Velar on my channel and I had quite a few choice things to say about it, if I'm honest. But I'm going to try and pretend that never happened for the sake of this review, because I want to look at this as a totally different Range Rover, Land Rover product. This is a very special car I'm driving today, and this is a very expensive car. So you'd expect some of the things that I criticised the Velar for, mainly around quality issues, to be less of a factor here. This is the Range Rover Sport 3.0 P460e. So this is the plug-in hybrid with a 6-cylinder engine, and this is the Autobiography. So unless you go for the full-blooded SV V8 version of this car, this is the top of the line. This has also got the black pack. It is fully pimped out. So if you want to know more about this car, buckle up and let's get into it. So the fifth and latest generation of the Range Rover came out in 2022 and it's called the L460, and this has had a couple of tweaks since then. They're about to bring out a fully electric version of the Range Rover in 2024 as well. So that's going to be an interesting seller. But this one is also quite interesting because this generation of Range Rover was the first to have plug-in hybrids. Now you can get two plug-in hybrids along with a few diesels, a couple of petrols as well. But this one here I've got today is a plug-in hybrid, and it's the lower powered of the two options, but it's still a pretty punchy car. So this P460e has a 3-litre petrol engine mated to an electric motor, producing a combined 460 horsepower and 621 newton meters of torque, and that will get you in hybrid mode 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, which is pretty good. Now there's quite a lot of different specs you can get with this car, and I'm not going to sit and go through all the different toys you get with them because you can read that yourself online. It's not really adding any value to your life, me telling you that, but I'll leave a link to it in the description. But you do have the S, the SC, the Dynamics SC, this Autobiography, which is absolutely maxed out. Then you've got the SV Edition 2 if you go for the 4.4 litre V8, so that's a different spec and that's very exclusive. But this one has all the toys thrown at it. But if you go for the S spec, it's still pretty well kitted out. But plug-in hybrids have come a long way from the days of the early adopters. My first one that I had was a Skoda Octavia VRS IV, and the battery, that was absolute mince. You're lucky to get 25 miles out of it. Whereas this thing, it's got a 38.2 kilowatt hour battery, and it says it'll do up to 69 miles of all electric range. In the real world, it's probably more like 50-55, but how many people do you think actually do a commute on their daily basis before they can actually plug it back in at home that's much longer than that? Probably the minority of people. So that is a really useful electric only range. And unlike in my Hyundai Santa Fe, where the minute you put some throttle down, it kicks in the petrol engine, it doesn't do it in this. If you want to be in EV mode, it will just use your battery and nothing else until it's gone. And I love that. And also, because on paper the CO2 emissions, and this is a load of bollocks really, because if you do just drive it in hybrid mode all the time, your CO2 emissions are going to go way up. But if you are just driving it in electric only mode, it brings the official number right down. And so you're in the lowest band of CO2. And so for car tax, for a car like this, it's actually quite affordable to tax. And it's going to change from next year, so I'm not going to throw numbers at you, but essentially this is going to be cheaper to tax than the diesels by quite some way. But apart from being a very desirable car in a lot of other ways, a Range Rover is generally known for being a very practical car, and it's probably a very good car to have if you've got a decent sized family. So what's it like in the back? So a couple of adults are going to be absolutely buzzing back here. This is a lovely luxury experience. So from that point of view, very good. Knee room is excellent. Seats in driving position, I'm 5'9", and the seats kind of recess in a bit as well to help. But I've got loads of knee room. Toe room's really good as well, and that seat's got loads of range of motion. So yeah, you can really spread out, particularly because you can recline these seats electrically, which is brilliant. Everything about these seats is just absolutely fantastic. So really comfortable on the outer two seats. The middle passenger though, not quite as good, to be honest. This isn't like an Audi Q7 where you've got 3 independent seats and everybody feels like they're getting the same level of comfort. This middle one is not as wide, it's raised up, it's just nowhere near as comfortable. There is almost no transmission tunnel though, so that does help a lot. You will get 3 people sitting here abreast, but if you had 2 child seats in the outer seats, the middle person is still going to be a bit snug. Then on the cubby side of things, you've got this massive center armrest that comes down, and it's really wide, and that is so soft and comfortable for your elbow. There's no cup holder for your elbow to fall into, and if you press this button, opens up, and once I take out this random walkie-talkie and sun visor, there is a felt line bit in here as well, so you can definitely get a mobile phone or whatever in there. And then you press the front bit and there's a couple of cup holders come out, and they've got teeth as well, so that is good. Although that is piano black there, so that is going to scratch well easily if you've got kids in the back, and that's down a lot. Put that back and then have a look in here, and yep, these door bins are pretty crap actually. They are felt lined on the side but not the bottom, which is interesting. So the bit that you need to be felt lined so things don't rattle about, not felt lined. So that's not ideal and they're not big. So if you want a bottle somewhere, it's gonna have to go in there. You do have sun visors though, so that is going to stop a lot of glare getting in for young kids trying to have a wee nap. And yeah, this just feels really soft for your elbow as well, and pretty comfortable to actually put your elbow in the right place. So that's all good. Isofix in our two seats are really easy to get to. The bar's just sticking out. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that, although I would be very careful putting a child seat in there that has an anchor on it, because yeah, you could really scratch your lovely leather, so be careful with that. You've also got nice climate control in the back that's easy to use, looks kind of nice as well, but it is piano black, so that could scratch quite easily. A couple of nice airplane style pockets which are really quite fancy looking. This pan roof letting lots of light in, it just looks absolutely great from back here. This is a lovely place to spend time. Something else that I should really mention is that if you want a 7-seater, you can't get it in the Range Rover Sport. You're gonna have to go for the regular Range Rover, or a Discovery, or a Land Rover Discovery Sport. You just can't get one in this Range Rover Sport. So if you really want a sporty looking SUV that also has a 7-seater, you might need to start thinking about something like a BMW X7 maybe then, or an Audi Q7 as well. That also has really good 7-seat option as well. So that is a little bit of a chink in the armour, but personally I always just think the back two seats are kind of useless if you have a big family, because you're then going to have nowhere to put your stuff. Now the problem you've got with the plug-in hybrid version of this car is, well, the batteries have to go somewhere and they're under the floor in the boot, and that makes a massive difference to the amount of space you've actually got here. If you go for the diesel version, you've got over 800 litres of space in the boot with the seats up. If you go for the plug-in hybrid, it drops to almost half. So that is quite significant, and if you're needing this as a major load lugger, definitely need to think about that, because it really is not that big a boot. It's a lovely square shape, it's got loads of tie down points. You can electrically put the back seats down as well, and they split 40-20-40, which is really useful. And yeah, it's a nice boot, and it's got a lot of underfloor storage right at the front. You can put the cables there as well. You've also got this partition you can lift up so that you can actually hold stuff more securely in. It is a good functional practical boot, but in the plug-in hybrid you're making a fairly major compromise, so remember that. So there's a couple of options this particular owner bought on this car. One is upgrading from 22 to 23 inch rims on the Autobiography, and they look fantastic. But also these seats as well, they are two-tone leather, which is an option, but the upgraded leather itself is part of the Autobiography, and they are so soft, and these are some of the comfiest seats I've ever been in. When you buy a Range Rover, comfort is got to be one of the top priorities, and these seats hugely deliver on that. 20-way electric adjustment, some of which you can do from the door, and then some of it's in the infotainment, which isn't ideal, but you can literally manipulate the shape of these any way you like. They must be an absolute fortune to make, and they are just amazing. And on top of that, you've got massaging capabilities as well, and there's loads of different types of massages as well. They're absolutely brilliant. Something else that's good is the driving position, and yeah, I mean, everything about the comfort side of things is fantastic. What I do also love is you've got these extra little Range Rover touches that you can ratchet up and put in place that basically give your elbow just a little bit more support, so when you're driving you just feel like you're sitting super comfortable, and that is definitely a little Range Rover touch that very few other cars do. So based on the seats, we're off to a really good start, but the general design of this cabin is absolutely lovely, and the fact that the owner paid for this two-tone leather upgrade really does take it to another level. And all this suede around here as well, it's just so lovely in here. It does feel like you're sitting in a really nice lounge. It's beautiful. The steering wheel, lovely leather on that too, but I don't like the plasticky buttons. I really don't know what they were doing there. Really cheap feeling, and clickiness is not satisfying like in an Audi. Really don't like that, and they're just, yeah, just cheap feeling. I don't get it. It's just totally brings down everything else, you know. It just really undermines the quality of everything else. And the touch points for your elbows are lovely as well, but this center console is all piano black too, so looks great when it's new like this car is, but once it gets a bit older, not so much, you know. That's going to start to scratch really easily, and then it's really going to make the whole ambiance look a bit tarnished, and that's just a real shame they've done that, because yeah, the amount they've spent on this car, they could definitely have used a slightly better material around their center console. But there are other really good quality touches that we need to talk about, and the general fit and finish of everything is very good, and definitely better than in the Velar. The indicator stalks feel really nicely damped. This door, heavy door, that is a lovely door close, and it's also got a soft door close as well, so you don't have to fully close it and it'll just suck it in anyway. I did find though getting in and out of the Range Rover, it's a very high step to get in, but I kind of felt like I banged my head getting in. I almost felt like I had to duck to get back in, so I wasn't really loving that. But generally, the whole sort of fit and finish in here is really good, and the materials are high quality. Yeah, it's a quality product. But even with this new PHEV Pro infotainment system that they've got, I'm not a big fan, to be honest. It's very similar to the one in the Velar. It's got a curved screen, which I think helps with glare, and yeah, not really seeing any glare, so that's good. And it's quite bright, and it's got big buttons, I guess, and they're relatively responsive, but there's a tiny bit of lag still. And I just generally think it's just a very overly complicated system to use, particularly on the move. It's all a touch screen. You have got voice control, but I just would love a wee rotary controller like a BMW does, or used to have. This whole system to me just feels a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but the graphics are absolutely brilliant. It does feel like a very modern infotainment and very techy, and this new cockpit is bloody great. It's very customizable, and the graphics on it are fantastic as well. So yep, can't complain about that. It's an interesting angle. It's kind of going that way, but it's still very nice. And yeah, I think they've designed all this to avoid glare hitting the screens, which I do like. But I just am a huge fan of the way they do their infotainments in Jaguar Land Rover products. I'm just not. It's also not a very driver-centric cockpit. It's just kind of straight in the middle there. It's not quite a case for the facing away from the driver police. You know, in some cars where you're like, it's actually facing the passenger, but it's not facing me. And it's not meant to be a driver-centric car, Range Rover. It's not a sports car, but I do like it when things face the driver. And they don't, but it's a big enough screen that I don't really find that an issue. Also, this car has an upgraded Meridian sound system, and it sounds absolutely great. So yeah, I would just get your Spotify on through your CarPlay and just absolutely beast out your tunes in this thing. But when it comes to Cubbies, and I love my Cubbies, up front I think they've absolutely nailed it in this car. You've got this massive bin here. This is really deep in here. That's like a Tesla's. That is felt lined as well, and oh, that is excellent in there. And you've also got cup holders, which will hold pretty big bottles. Yeah, they're good for different size bottles, actually, good depth as well. But if you don't want that space, you can pull it back, and there's a deeper bin here, and that's felt lined too. So that's a very clever use of the space. Then at the front here, you can put your phone in. It's got wireless charging, and it fits a big phone. Mine's an absolute beast of a phone, fits no bother. So all that's good. There's a little cubby underneath this floating console, so you can get more stuff in there, maybe another phone. And then the glove boxes, you've got two. You've got one at the bottom and one at the top. So that is pretty cool. The door bins are felt lined on the side, but not the bottom, a bit like in the back, which is really kind of weird. And yeah, things will rattle about, and they're not that big. They're big enough, but they're not huge. So they're okay. But overall, yeah, I think the Cubby side of things is ace. Now with the Autobiography, you get a lot of toys, just about every toy under the sun you can think of. And I've talked about a few of them, and some of them are standard from the lower specs as well, like, you know, loads of range of adjustment in your seats. But if you go up the range, you're getting a better sound system, you've got a head-up display, you've got loads of subtle things like heat-insulated glass and stuff like that. But this car does have some options on top of it, on top of the Autobiography. So I just want to let you know what those are in case you're going, oh, I thought that was standard, and it's actually not. Because a couple of these I was thinking that should be standard. Like privacy glass, that was extra. On top of that, the sun blinds in the back, I thought they were standard. Nope, that's an option as well. And also this car's two-tone leather interior, the black pack on the outside, which includes the black writing, and it's also got black metallic paint as an option as well. One thing I don't like about this car, and I find this is probably just Range Rovers in general, is these door handles that come out. They just seem a bit clunky, and yeah, it looks all very minimalist, that they're tucked in when you're driving or locked. But there's a couple of times where I'm like, I want to open the door, and I'm like, oh yeah, need to unlock the car, or I just find them a little bit flimsy when you pull them as well, and I just don't really like the look of those. I have to say, they're just an overly engineered solution that I just really think could be better. Now, you've probably heard that Range Rovers, to get insurance, are horrendous, like laughably expensive. And in a lot of cases, you can't physically get companies to insure you at all. Range Rover even had to start their own policy just to try and get people insurance. And in some cases, you still couldn't get it. But basically, insuring Range Rovers is an absolute nightmare, particularly depending on where you live in the country. because they're so easy to steal, but we'll come back to that. That aside, obviously reliability is not exactly one of their strong points, and this is too new a car to really say whether or not it's that reliable or not yet, although the owner has already had one issue which turned out to be a coolant problem that had to get sorted under warranty. So yep, they've had this car for less than a year and already it's had to go into the workshop, so not a good sign. But that being said, I couldn't get insurance for this car. In fact, it's weird because I actually got a quote last week and it seemed to go through all right, and it was really quite cheap, and I was like, wow, there's something all right about this. And then when I went to do it today, before I physically started the review, it basically stopped me at the last hurdle and said, we cannot insure this car. And I was like, yep, thought so. I just knew that that was going to actually be the case. So I've kind of always thought in my head that this was going to be a bit of a problem with doing that part of the review. So basically, I went out with the owner of the car and sat in the passenger seat and tried to get a feel for a few things about the driving experience so I could talk about them. But I'm not going to talk too much in detail about this because I didn't drive the car myself. So full disclosure, I cannot properly verify the driving experience of this car because I physically did not drive it. But I can say a few things. First of all, and probably not a huge surprise for you, this is a very, very quiet car to drive in. And if you're in EV mode, it's very quiet. It's absolutely glorious how refined this actually is. Even when the petrol engine is in play in hybrid mode, still really quite quiet. It's absolutely lovely. So that part of the luxury experience is a massive tick. But considering this car's riding on 23-inch upgraded rims, I was expecting a fairly firm ride. Nope. Unbelievable how good it was. Electronic air suspension, not only absorbing the bumps incredibly well, but going around bends, it's also adjusting as you go with your driving conditions. And so it's actually helping level out the body lean as well. And so even when you're going around a corner, even this big barge, it's not leaning all that much, particularly in dynamic mode. It's just really staying quite flat in the corners. So there's definitely a bit, but it's not that bad. It's not that nimble a car just because it's so blooming heavy, particularly now it's a plug-in hybrid. It's got the batteries as well. But going around corners, for all I didn't drive it, it did it competently enough. I didn't get a chance to use my timing gear, but it definitely is roughly 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds. It is really, really rapid in hybrid mode. If you're in EV mode, much less so, but that is obviously the mode you're using for efficiency. And it does the job. It'll go at motorway speeds in EV mode. So when my mate put his foot down in dynamic hybrid mode, it pumped synthetic engine notes in the cabin. Not a huge fan of those, but it did go quite well with the performance. I was like, oh, this is fast. And you add that with the sound it was making, it did feel like we were driving a really fast car, but it's definitely not going to have a patch on the SV 4.4 litre V8. The gearbox is an 8-speed torque converter automatic, and I didn't get a chance to really get a feel for that, but I did ask the owner what he thought of it, and he said he didn't really know, because the thing is, most of the time, and because it's got such a big battery range, most of the time he just drives in EV mode, and the fact that you can force it into EV mode, unlike in my Hyundai Santa Fe where it would just kick in the petrol engine a lot, you can leave it in EV mode and for the majority of the time it will just use up the battery until it's gone. So he says the majority of driving they do in it is just in electric mode around town, and if they were to go on a long journey, then they will then use the petrol engine. And even at that, because you're then at motorway speeds most of the time, you're not really changing gear much anyway, so he hasn't got much to say about the gearbox other than it gets on and does its business. So no complaints to report there, but I couldn't really verify it. I could definitely talk about the visibility from a stationary perspective, and these wing mirrors, like any Range Rover, are absolutely massive, so you have got a very good view of what's behind you. You've got a sort of frameless rear interior mirror, and looking around the car, yeah, no issues really with that. Parking won't be a problem because you've got high-res cameras as long as they're clean, and parking sensors and all that stuff. It is a very, very good car for seeing around. But this is also a Range Rover product, which means it's pretty good off-road, and there's plenty of settings for that too, and it will be superior to a lot of its rivals in that regard that are classed themselves as big, rugged SUVs. I just wouldn't want to take it off-road really, because it's just too nice a car. This car really is kind of ticking all boxes in a lot of ways from a driving experience, because you've still got, you know, a lot of electric only range, which is going to be really good for keeping your fuel bills down, and I'm amazed that a plug-in hybrid is doing over 50 miles in the real world now, and that is just brilliant. But when you do want to have that little bit of extra performance and know that you don't need to worry about range anxiety, because a Range Rover is meant to be a car that you're going to go anywhere with, you know, if you're going up in the mountains, it's not going to be charge points. So having one that has these two powertrains together is fantastic, and that 3-litre petrol engine is a beast. But on the point of security, if you live down in the south of England, yeah, I probably would avoid getting a Range Rover altogether, because the chances of you owning it for the whole time and it never getting nicked are probably quite low. But if you're going to get one, definitely get one that you could put in a garage at night and lock. The owner of this car does have a garage, but we also live in the northeast of Scotland, so there's probably less issues with theft. But if you do want to have a bit of peace of mind about that, you can get a 12-month subscription from Range Rover for a tracking device, which is really quite shocking that they're charging for that. That's the sort of thing that, given how easy they are apparently to steal, should be free, and the fact they're charging you for that is really quite disgraceful. And finally, on price, and this is not going to be groundbreaking news for you, they're expensive cars. The base price diesel in S-Spec is starting from 75 grand, although like I said, you do get quite a lot of toys with that. But you can go up to 171 grand and change if you go for the SV. So that is quite a big difference in price and quite a big difference in performance and running costs as well. But yeah, if you can afford to buy a Range Rover, then you're probably not somebody that really cares. You know, this is a luxury car for people that are able to spend a bit of money, let's be honest. And this particular one I'm driving today is a very, very, very nice car. And for long distance cruising, I would struggle to think of a car I'd want to spend more time in than this. It's just so epically comfortable. And the only thing I'd be really worried about is the piano black getting damaged and making it look a bit tatty and things going wrong with it, to be honest, or somebody nicking it maybe a little bit. But those are the things that would concern me about having this car. Outside of that, I think it delivers in just about every other area. And for me, I like a big boot, and for a car this size, I want the biggest boot possible, and therefore I would rather have the diesel than the plug-in hybrid, so I've got more of a boot space, particularly as we've now got a Retriever. But it is a very, very nice car, and I've really enjoyed being in it. It's just a shame I didn't get to actually drive it, but I hope you still found the information I gave about that useful, and I'm sorry I couldn't actually do that. But yeah, the cost of insurance is just too much. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do give it a like. Feel free to leave me a comment as well with your thoughts on the video or your experiences of owning this car, and if I've got anything wrong, then no worries with that. Let me know. Humble to hear it. And yeah, let's just have a good debate about this car as always. And if you do enjoy my videos, please do subscribe as well. Loads more coming up on the channel, but the YouTube algorithm is absolutely brutal, and so every interaction I can have with my videos helps YouTube actually recommend them more, so that would be much appreciated. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.